earlier you mentioned families, and so I think that's something that a lot of people have the misconception that farms and ranches in the United States are all corporately owned, but that's really not the case, is it?
No, most family farm, 96%, I think the number is family-owned operations. Probably 2 to 3% of that remaining part are family-owned corporations, which get classified as corporations. Right. And then there are a few corporate farms, very few. Less than 1% of the farms are actually corporate-owned farms that are not family-oriented in one shape or another. And people have to realize the designation of a corporation is for tax purposes. And so families will set them up to, in fact, I operate under a corporation myself. So that's a pretty bad measure of who owns or manages property, but that's kind of become the norm to think about that. And another thing, if about half of the beef cattle produced are produced off operations that have less than 100 head of cattle. So they're actually very small operations, produce a large portion of the cattle. Probably, I'm gonna do my math right quick, about 80% of the operations have under 100 head of cattle. So a lot of those cattle are really produced on small operations, and that leads to a lot of inefficiencies. And then we start commingling those cattle with like kind of cattle, and we start building our inventory that goes to the finishing phase. Very few operations have over 1,000 cows, very few. There's a middle section in there from the 100 to 500 that were a lot of family operations, and they are, and I got a good definition of family operation. It means all your labor comes from your family, and that's kind of the way that works a lot of times. But it takes about 300 to 400 cows just to make a decent living in beef cattle production. And that's something a lot of people don't think. They think if you have cattle, you're just rolling in the money. That is not the case. It is a fairly small profit margin business, and that's why scale has got to be important. If they can only make just a little bit per animal, they need more animals to make money. And so that's why in nearly every operation, and I take probably too much pleasure in this, but if somebody goes into organic production and they're making good money off a niche market and they can sell more product, they get bigger. And they'll keep getting bigger as long as they can scale that up. So at some point in time, it goes from a family operation to you have to get cooperators or somebody else. So we have to really be interested. It's interesting to me to think about the same people that don't want us to be big operators need to get bigger to make more money. So the model's there. It's just a matter of what your preference is and how you approach it. So depending on what level of income you need, you kind of have to ramp up production. And in most businesses, the more you can produce on a given set of expenses, the better off you are.